Hello, everybody. Scott Golden here with the Golden Opportunities Coaching YouTube channel, and there are over 400 things for you to check out on the channel. Variety of audios on a variety of topics. Hopefully, something that will be of benefit to you somewhere along the way. And if that's true, please feel free to reach out. Please feel free to have a conversation if you are dealing with emotional challenges or self-image issues or any other relationship or business or personal challenge that may benefit from coaching. Please feel free to reach out. The best way to do that is through the About Me section on this page. The About Me section on this page can lead to my website, which ultimately can lead you to get in contact with me and all that good stuff. So the next thing we're going to take a look at here is the mindset or the things that people with high functioning depression kind of wish we knew. HFD or high functioning depression is a depression that almost in a lot of cases looks I don't want to say invisible because that's a misnomer of a thought, but it is kind of sort of almost invisible in some ways, in that unless the person has been exceptionally honest about what they're struggling with, you may not even know they're struggling with depression. A lot of times these individuals may even be accused of things like imposter syndrome, where they're not really depressed, or they're feigning their symptoms in order to get out of doing certain things or being a certain way, and that can be hugely negative for them because to them the struggle is real, but because they have the ability to hold it together in the majority of situations, let's say 90 to 95, 97% of the time, people believe that they don't have the problems they actually do. And that's because people with HFD become really good at bluffing, faking it until they make it. I didn't learn that I was prone to HFD until my late 20s, early 30s because of the biochemistry and other illness related challenges that my biological family experienced, being primarily influenced and raised more so by my grandparents than my parents because of my parents' mental illness. I didn't see the correlation between HFD and how it affected my life, and certainly being a trauma survivor, didn't know that either. But a person with HFD is more likely to bluff that everything's okay, that they're okay, that everything's going to be okay, that nothing is wrong, that they can function, that they can get through. And a lot of times it's hard to prove that they're actually struggling at all because outwardly they're getting up, they're going to work, they're meeting their kids, they're there for their partner. Meanwhile, what people don't see is that behind the scenes, their standards for themselves are so irrealistic and toxic, and their view of what they're accomplishing, even if other people think they're accomplishing, let's say, 85 to 95% of their goals, they think they're doing about half that. And so the standards that they live by they're super overwhelming, and the overwhelm can come out in self-loathing, self-hate, self-harm. But usually most of these things, the thought process goes underexposed, underexpressed. The person never really says anything, and so the misnomer is this person is not depressed. I never would have guessed they were depressed. They look like they had it all together, but looks are deceiving. Our society, Western society, and one of the reasons that in a perfect world I'd like to live in a more Easternized culture is because Western society places so much value on the mask and the masking of how we often truly feel, that the realities of acknowledging, negative emotion or negative life experiences become extremely hard for people to do because it's almost met with, well, I've got it worse, and we don't accept where people are in their journey, and it can be extremely difficult. The level of energy that it takes for someone with HFD to function is about anywhere from 2 to 4 times the average person, because they are doing the daily unconscious functions, they're doing the conscious functions, the things that take thought, and also they're managing the emotional status on a very high level, almost a burnout level, to make it look like they're doing everything effortlessly. In reality, it's taking double and triple the effort, almost like think of a computer that's running too many operations. That's why when a person with highly functioning depression finally does break down, it can be extremely sudden. It can be extremely violent, and I'm not talking about physical violence, but just extremely expressive. It can be overwhelming. It can be explosive because they're storing many times months or years, or sometimes in horrible situations, even decades of depressive experiences. I remember my biological father, just as an example, had a breakdown in the late 90s. Now, going back, I had been told he had had two of these prior, one in the 60s and one in the late 70s. Now, what's interesting there is I hadn't witnessed one because the last one he had was before I was born. Now, when I finally saw it for what it was, it explained a lot of his negative behaviors, his violent tendencies, and all of that. But to literally be able to go a decade plus without having that breakdown experience was just a sign of how deep a mask he wore. The inability to focus, because the focus is being multifaceted and multi-pulled, is another issue for people with highly functioning depression. This may mean they're staring off in space. This may mean they might have the same conversation over and over and over again. This may mean that they have a moment where they're not paying attention or they need to be reminded of things. This is because the focus on maintaining emotion and functioning to complete simple tasks supersedes the ability to focus on present moment a lot of the time. So getting lost in the moment is higher for these people. Routines are extremely difficult for people with highly functional depression because the monotony of having to do the same thing over and over and over again, the monotony of having to do things in a certain order and or do the same things day after day after day feels like a punishment. It feels like a prison. And so for these individuals, they feel like they just completed this 5 minutes ago, even though it was yesterday or 2 days ago or last week. And so that pressure becomes too much. And then the last one is the misnomer that they have to break is that there's weakness in asking for help. Now, a highly depressed person is actually more likely by about 60 to 70% to be of a higher intellect. This is because usually people with middle to lower intellect are not as good at emotional regulation as a person with high functioning depression, which means they will talk themselves out of, sometimes for weeks, months, or years, getting the help they need because they see it as weakness, or they're afraid of what people will think, or they're afraid of not being able to get help, and they believe that they've gone through every possible scenario for getting help that possibly exists on the planet. And so getting past the thought that there is weakness in asking for the help is one of the biggest challenges that someone with HFD faces. So hopefully this has been helpful to you. I encourage you to keep your feet on the ground, your mind in the moment. Till next time, everybody.